Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our headlines. Tensions have escalated in the Middle East after Iran and Israel carried out attacks following an unprecedented assault on Iranian nuclear and military facilities. Israel says Tehran will burn if further missiles are launched, while stating that 20 Iranian commanders were killed in Friday's strikes. Meanwhile, world leaders have continued in calls for de-escalation and calm amid rising tensions as the Pope calls for responsibility and reason from both sides. Meanwhile, Iran says nuclear talks with the US scheduled for Sunday in Oman are meaningless after the strikes on nuclear infrastructure. The government of India has stressed the need for an extended surveillance of the Boeing 787 Dreamliner series. Ram Manohar Naidu, the civil aviation minister, highlighted that the decoding of a recovered black box will provide further information on why the crash occurred. Ukraine says they have received around 1,200 bodies from Russia, though Russian news agency TASS reports it didn't receive any of its dead soldiers. President Zelensky says that fighting is raging on, as Russia's defense ministry reports to have destroyed 110 Ukrainian drones. Gaza medics say that 23 people have been killed in the enclave, with many of those dead near aid sites. Israel has ordered residents in and around Khan Yunis to head westwards as Operation Gideon's Chariot continues, with more than 50 hostages dead and alive still being held by Hamas. Thousands of protesters are set to take to the streets today in the US as preparations continue ahead of Donald Trump's military parade. Meanwhile, US Marines deployed to Los Angeles have made their first known detention of a civilian amidst unrest. Kazakhstan says that Russian nuclear giant Rosatom will lead the construction of the first atomic power plant in the country. Proposals were also made by the state-owned China National Nuclear Corporation, as well as French and South Korean companies. And in sport, South Africa have beaten Australia in the World Test Championship final at Lords after a stunning comeback. Opener Aidan Markram was the hero for South Africa, scoring a calculated but majestic 100 as the victors chased down an unlikely total of 282 in London. Tensions between Israel and Iran have erupted into a major military escalation, with deadly strikes shattering hopes of diplomatic progress. Iranian media reports that an Israeli drone strike has killed a regional police chief in the country's west. The Israeli military says it targeted over 150 locations in Iran in a massive overnight offensive, killing at least 20 senior commanders, including top military figures like Revolutionary Guards Chief and Aerospace Force Head Amir Ali Hajizadeh. 9 nuclear scientists were also among the dead. As explosions rocked provinces like East Azerbaijan and Lorestan, Iran activated air defences in major cities. Amid the carnage, Iran has declared ongoing talks with the United States meaningless, blaming President Trump's support for Israel's offensive. Israel, for its part, says the strikes have dealt a crippling blow to Iran's nuclear program. Defense Minister Israel Katz has warned that if missile attacks continue, Tehran will burn. Well, joining us to discuss all of these developments in our top story today is Adrien Calamel, a terror scholar who is joining us from New York. Adrien, as always, it is a pleasure to have you on, but we're having you speaking to us this evening in the midst of uncertainty and potential escalation that could have wider ramifications. Firstly, can I just get your opinion on what your thoughts were after these strikes have been carried out by Israel's military and then following the overnight action we saw from Iran?
Thank you for having me, Joshua, and good evening to all your viewers. when I first saw Israel's actions and what they took out, we could see this coming. Trump was kind of giving the Islamic Republic an off-ramp with negotiations, but if you know Ali Khamenei, and Trump probably knows him from his first term, he was never going to give up the right to enrich and to reprocess. And Khamenei would say that that's for peaceful purposes, but if the Islamic Republic reprocessed and enriched uranium, they would be the first country not to have a nuclear weapon. And so what is going on is, what had happened was we were getting really close to a window where they were weaponizing and militarizing their highly enriched uranium. And so that's why the clock was really ticking. Trump put down that 60 days. I thought it could extend to 90 days, but it needed to be done from an Israeli perspective, because this was an existential threat that they were facing from the Islamic Republic, acquiring a nuclear weapon that openly chanced death to Israel, for the destruction of Israel, etc. So that's the one aspect of it. As far as the Iranian response, or the Islamic Republic's response, it's much of what I expected, because they don't really have much to respond with. Their biggest piece of leverage that kind of protected the nuclear program was Hezbollah. And Hezbollah had been basically, they're a shell of their former self. Multiple layers of their commanding control structure has been just eliminated. So they didn't have that as a foil. So what we can expect, I would think, from the Islamic Republic is more of the same, shooting of ballistic missiles, but that's a finite supply. They can also activate the Iraqi proxies, which have been relatively quiet, but what you see on the table is what you get right now as far as the Islamic Republic's response and their actual capabilities.
Yes, Adrien, I'm glad you brought up the time frame there, that 60-day period that the US had given Iran to agree to a nuclear deal. I have asked this question already today, but because I haven't got a straight answer, I will come to you with it. We know that the 2015 nuclear deal between Iran and several countries, including the United States, took years of planning with multi-nation collaboration. This conversation and these deals that have been spoken about, put forward, Steve Witkoff isn't a diplomat. He's ultimately a golf buddy of Donald Trump's, who's been thrust into this position. Given that only 60 days was set aside and Israel have attacked on day 61, was it realistic that a deal would ever be agreed in that time frame, having not done previously, before Trump pulled the US out of the deal?
Well, I don't think it would ever realistically be done because of our election cycle and the regime and Ali Khamenei's belief that a nuclear weapon and the ability to enrich uranium is critical to the survival of the regime. Trump got a good look at what the Islamic Republic was like from 2016 to 2020. By 2018, he had had enough. There were 2 years of negotiations. Then he moved to the maximum pressure campaign. Then we had 4 years of Biden letting the Islamic Republic violate all sorts of sanctions, not really keeping an eye on what's going on with the nuclear program, etc. So no, 2 months, no, it's not realistic. But this was always going to happen, Joshua. I'm sad to say, because it's the regime. They believed that a nuclear weapon was critical to their survival. No matter what the JCPOA said or what was in it, that was just pushing the ball down the road. It was to push back sunset clauses, but it was really still giving them a pathway to a bomb. If you look at the original JCPOA, it would not have prevented them from acquiring a nuclear weapon. Yes,
Adrien, and as we bring an end to this discussion, I do want to look at US involvement. We know that overnight strikes from Iran, over 150 ballistic missiles fired. The US were in part helping to bring those down and limit civilian damage and civilian casualty. Today, Iran has warned the US, the UK and France that if this continues, then there will be attacks on military bases, also on shipping in the region. How quickly could this escalate into a wider war that would involve potentially the US and other Western allies, along with Israel, Iran, and potentially other nations on the side of Iran, like Russia, who have spoken out in strong terms against the move from Israel?
Yeah, great point. And we fully expect that, the second we get involved or the second the Islamic Republic is feeling desperate, that they will hit maybe at one of our bases in Iraq. I have heard today, and this is an escalation coming from Ali Khamenei, and this would bring a very strong response from Western powers that he wants to block the Strait of Hormuz. If that happens, that shuts off a lot of global oil supply. That's something that he has always saber-rattled with in the past. It's led to crises during the Iran-Iraq War, 1980 to 88. Then there was a tanker war from 86 to 88 that took place there. So if he does that, then I would expect the United States to, President Trump say, we're going to eliminate every frigate, bog hammer, these little boats that they have to maneuver around any listening stations, spy stations, listening ships. They're all going to be scuttled and sent to the bottom. So if Khamenei he's playing with a weak hand, if he thinks he can do these type of things with impunity, I think he better take a look in the mirror and realize that, this is not going to be the goal here is not to have a long drawn-out war. The goal here is to completely end the nuclear program with the Islamic Republic. And I will say if that happens and this continues to happen, what we may see is the Iranian people rise up and take back their country.
Adrien, I wish we had longer to talk, but unfortunately we are out of time. Further escalation is possible, and we will be here to bring you all of that information on NewsX World as it happens. But we move on now, and US Marines deployed to Los Angeles have made their first detention amid tensions over federal immigration raids. The detained individual, a US Army veteran, was held before being handed over to Homeland Security. This marks a rare use of active duty military on American soil as protests continue in response to the immigration sweeps. Meanwhile, nationwide demonstrations are expected to surge this weekend, with over 2,000 No Kings protests planned across the country. Organised as a direct response to President Trump's upcoming military parade in Washington, D.C., which coincides with his 79th birthday, the movement opposes what they call the administration's expanding use of military force and immigration crackdowns. In Los Angeles, city officials and law enforcement have expressed confidence that they are fully prepared to manage the protests over the weekend. A curfew remains in place downtown, and authorities have pledged to allow peaceful demonstration while cracking down on any violence or property damage. Several updates and a lot expected in the United States over the coming hours. Joining us, Martin Sa-Arrayas, an international affairs expert in Quito, Ecuador, to go through all of those. Martin, let's first look at what's happening in Los Angeles. Further nights of protests, an arrest now being made by Marines, believed to be the first time a civilian has been arrested in this situation. How significant of a move is that in the midst of this parade that's coming up?
Absolutely, Joshua. I think these steps are absolutely new in the US history. It's the first time that Marines are arresting civilians. And more than that, we're seeing that a clash between the federal government and the state of California. We're seeing that Donald Trump wants to enforce its policies regarding immigration by federalizing the troops and the force of order in the state of California. We're seeing that these civil demonstrations have been going further. This is a political demonstration, even that goes further the borders of the US. Also, the president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, has been accused for cooperating with this demonstration, something that she has denied. But still, this is a very complicated situation between the U.S. immigrants and the Mexican state, and this is absolutely a new subject.
Yes, and Martin, of course, this parade coming up, marking Trump's 79th birthday, but also celebrating the military. A lot of protests expected, given the sheer cost of this parade. Many people saying it is politicizing the military as well. What is the discourse surrounding this? Is this split between Trump supporters and non-Trump supporters, or is there a clear undertone of frustration about the use of funds to celebrate Trump on his birthday?
Absolutely. I think this is a very political issue. And in fact, I do think that Donald Trump is going a little bit further in his power and the range that he can do and implement his policies. I think also the funds have been using for political campaigns, not only before Trump, but now for enforcing his image in the US and enforcing his support. But again, I think right now we're seeing a government that is enforcing its policies, but in a more in a stronger way, and also he wants to go and to influence the states. We need to remember that the Californian state is one of the most liberal and Democrat state. It's a blue state, and the authorities of this state, they are feeling that their power and their legitimacy is being clashed with the Trump administration, and they want to show that they are also part of the political and security system of the US, and that they need to work together.
Martin, I want to look at the apparent rising disconnect and discontent in the US over issues like immigration, something which was such a key part of Donald Trump's campaign and then his early days in office for his second term. Can you provide some context on that potential shift? And do we think that Donald Trump is losing popularity, or just those that oppose him are getting louder voices and are taking further action?
I think absolutely he's losing a lot of its support, because actually a lot of the Hispanic vote was very critical for Donald Trump. A lot of Hispanics voted for Trump because they supported the idea of deporting illegal aliens or criminals that enter the US illegally. The problem here is that we're seeing that the IC is enforcing these policies in a very abusive way. Actually, a lot of people who are legally in the States have been arrested without any logic, without any reason. So the Trump administration is losing a lot of his Hispanic support, because a lot of Hispanics who voted for him are being affected right now. They have relatives that they were in a legal track to get their American citizenship. They were legally residents, and now they're losing their possibility to stay in the States because of very strong policies of immigration that are actually being implemented in a very aggressive way, and actually was not what people expected. But yeah, he's losing a lot of its support. But however, he's doing what he already said in his campaign. He's applying what he said, and we need to focus in a balance between the federal government power and the California state power.
Yeah, so Martin, to end our discussion very briefly, we don't have long, but over 2,000 No Kings protests set for today. We're having a similar conversation, but just to provide the context for those outside of America, is this a conversation related to the military? Is this a conversation related to Trump? Or is this a culmination of frustration on a posse of issues that is now being brought to the fore in this moment of wider discontent?
I think this is an issue of power. I think this is an issue of how, what's the scope of the power of Donald Trump and his administration, how further and how wide can he go with his policies, and if he can directly change policies of states like California. Liberals say that this is an abuse of power. Trump says that this is an emergency. This is a very complicated issue. Immigration issue is one of the most complicated and frustrated issues in the United States, and he's basically saying that he has all of the right to implement this whatever way is possible. So this is the debate.
Martin Saar-Reyes, as always, thank you ever so much for joining us and providing context on such an issue. We will bring you all of those updates from that parade as we get them. But we move now back to the Middle East. At least 23 people have reportedly been killed in Gaza, most of them near an aid distribution site. This, according to local medical staff in the enclave. Hospital workers in central Gaza say 15 people died as they tried to reach the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation centre near the Netzarim corridor. Others were killed in separate attacks across the Strip. Israel and the aid organisation have not yet commented. The foundation began handing out food packages at the end of May. Since then, Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry claims 274 people have died near aid sites and over 2,000 others have been injured. Some context as well. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation accused Hamas of killing workers trying to arrive to the aid facility. Meanwhile, Israel has ordered evacuations in Khan Yunis and neighbouring areas. Civilians have been told to move west towards a humanitarian zone as Israel warns of further operations against what it calls terror organisations in the region. Now, joining us to discuss this latest devastating development for the people of Gaza amidst an ongoing conflict that may see a further escalation given the ongoing Israel-Iran tensions. Ali M. Abushbak, an independent Palestinian researcher, is joining us from Cairo. Ali, let's first look at these reports of further deaths around aid facilities. It's something that has sadly become common in recent days and weeks. What's the significance of deaths around an aid facility, given that the humanitarian situation is difficult and so many are still looking for that support that they need? Ali, just double checking that you can hear me.
Hello?
Hello, Ali. Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you, Joshua, for having me. The thing is, it's become, as you mentioned, that assassinated and targeting the humanitarian zone, it's become a common thing and become a daily thing. Unfortunately, the Palestinians in Gaza, they have a low hope. They have they can't collecting their everyday food to continue their life. The horrific reports that leaked from Gaza that Israel's continuous targeting the people who's gathering, who's suffering from starvation and famine. They are targeting them without any reason.
We seem to have lost Ali there while we try to work to get that connection back. Again, just some context of this war that, of course, has been raging on since Hamas launched its incursion into Israel. Its operation on the 7th of October 2023. Thousands killed in that attack. Hostages also taken, leading to Israeli military action within Gaza. A momentary ceasefire was in place at the beginning of the year, lasting just a couple of months until Israel resumed military activity in the enclave. This has seen escalation. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, has of course spoken about Operations Gideon's Chariot, which is a furthering of military activity in the enclave. This has seen an aid blockade, which, although some aid is getting in, is still causing difficulties for those living in the Gaza Strip. This coming amid those military strikes. Of course, hostages are still being held. Recently, the bodies of dead hostages have been found by Israel after that ceasefire in which hostage exchanges with Palestinian prisoners took place, but still over 50 dead and alive hostages believed to be held by Hamas. There was meant to be a UN Security Council meeting that took place overnight, but the ongoing escalation between Israel and Iran saw that meeting put off, and discussions instead were focused elsewhere in the Middle East. The situation still continues to be difficult on the ground, a situation that has been difficult for some time. And this is something that will continue to be one until a resolution can be agreed. In recent weeks, diplomatic pressure from Western nations, including France, the United Kingdom, Norway, Australia, condemning the action that was ongoing. UN meetings consistently looking at the situation. Resolutions calling for an immediate ceasefire, unconditional ceasefire, the resumption of aid and the return of hostages, vetoed by the United States in recent times. It is a dire situation, but attention in the region currently focused on Israel and Iran. The potential ramifications, as I mentioned in my question that I sent to Ali, could have wider reaching consequences. Hamas, allied with Iran, a proxy group by all intents, like Hezbollah, who have also been involved in conflict. This situation is continuing to escalate, and we will be across that as we get it. But for now, that's all we have time for. For all of the updates from across the world, make sure you're tuned in to NewsX World.